All right, we're live. Welcome. What is today? October 10th? No, October 9th. Time is flying. The year of our Lord, 2022. It's Sunday Zen with me and you and us. You plus me equals us. That's my calculus. Come on down, guys. I see a comment from Robert Mood. Wifey is on the way back from a 3-day meditation retreat. All right, here's my advice from someone who's been on these retreats. Give her some space. Because it's the tendency of families when people come back from these retreats to be like, so are you awake yet? Like, what's going on, bro? Are you a better person? Are you going to be less of a dick? The answer is no. You're going to be more of a dick for a while because you're going to be totally thrown back into the thought-based matrix. And you're going to be really potentially unsettled. You may be blissed out. You may have all that experience of it. But you may be, like I was on my last one, where I was like, oh my gosh, I realized on retreat, like everything I think I am is a lie. It's all just thought-based belief. It's just a matrix we're living in, man. Then you go home and your kids are like, so Dad, I'm starting middle school tomorrow. And you're like, what? Middle what? Huh? Huh? I thought you're supposed to be calm. Why are you freaking out? Because I can feel every energetic emotion that you're giving off right now. Like it's just like a field of energy I can feel. It's crazy. So the punchline is give her some space. Forgive her if she's a little weird. Let's see. Are we even live? Yeah, we are live. Good. Some people leaving comments saying they can't see anything. Ashley says, I can't believe it's our Thanksgiving long weekend. I can't wait for the turkey coming tonight. Dude, you Canadians and your Canadian Thanksgiving. Do you pay for that in Canadian dollars too? I guess you'd have to because that's your currency. See, many times on my show, I've noticed I'm very US centric because it's what I know right now. But the minute I leave the country and go travel to another country, it's almost like you get absorbed after a few days and you are that. Like now that culture feels more real than even American culture. It's strange. It's like a chameleon type of effect, which makes me think about, goes back to kind of personality stuff. So I've talked about Enneagram before for you guys who watch the show regularly. It's just another system of kind of looking at the different software of personality that our hardware of consciousness runs. And I think my software happens to be a 6 with a 7 wing, which the long story short means I am somebody who the fundamental fear is lack of security or lack of support. And the fundamental problem is that 6s don't really trust themselves, so they actually try to create support networks around them, and that often means they're adaptable. It means that they are reasonably, they can be reasonably normalish and fit in with lots of different people and be fiercely loyal and very good workers and that kind of thing, but they ultimately don't trust in their own intuition, and so they form committees of friends and stuff to make decisions, and they're very indecisive, and so a lot of times it can seem that they manifest opposites. Like they can be liberal and conservative at the same time. And that's the nature of the personality of the 6, whereas the 1 is more kind of the fundamental fear is not being good, not having that integrity of goodness. And so they kind of deny what their innate feelings are and they project an element of that kind of thing. So they often become very good politicians and lawyers and things like that, but they're quite consistent in their advocacy, right? Until they're not. And so everybody has this different software. Now, 6 with a 7 wing, the 7 is kind of the enthusiast, the hedonist, somebody who's looking for experiences all the time because ultimately their fear is they're kind of empty inside, that they've been kind of abandoned and they're afraid of their own feelings. So they try to seek outside themselves for experiences to kind of numb that up. And so a 6 with a 7 wing, that's me, I think, is somebody who kind of is like the comedian and tries to make friends that way and like is kind of always looking for the next thing because that's what the 7 kind of does, but is also quite ambivalent, which is the 6. So that toxic stew of personality can sometimes look like a chameleon or somebody who is inconsistent, but in reality, they're actually consistent with their personality type. So once you start to understand these different types, you can look at people less judgmentally and go, oh yeah, they're just playing on that particular software. And so the question then is, what's the fundamental operating system that's running that software? And that's the spiritual journey, is trying to find what you really are. Like, yeah, okay, so we're running this software, that's great. That's all form and appearance. But what is running it? what is actually aware of your thoughts, feelings, beliefs, forms, colors, shapes, the five senses, and the sixth sense of thought, which is kind of like a, I don't know, Dr. Ian McGilchrist describes this very well. He's a neuroscientist, philosopher, psychiatrist. He's written two great books. One is Master and His Emissary, about the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere in individuals and society, and kind of how our shift towards left hemisphere kind of tool-based grasping and reductionism is kind of wrecking us and is ruining our creativity and our holism and that kind of thing, and the general sense of the sacred. And his follow-up book, which is The Matter with Things, which is insanely awesome. Anyways, you can check some of his videos out online. He thinks of kind of the world of form in an interesting metaphor. He thinks of it like the way you think about the phases of water. So you have the solid phase, which is ice, which looks a certain way. It's opaque, it's hard, it's got some substance, it persists. And then there's liquid, which is more fluid, a little more translucent, but it still has certain characteristics. Then there's gas, which you can't see water vapor unless it's very dense in the form of fog or steam, different temperature differentials of water vapor. And then there's plasma, which is undifferentiated. You take those water atoms and you strip away the electrons at very high temperatures or pressures, and you end up with this plasma, which is this kind of undifferentiated potential. And he then says, you know, why isn't reality just like that, where what we experience are all different phases of consciousness? So you could start with matter, like this cup, this pen feels hard, persists, it appears. It seems like this is kind of persisting over time. And the way he describes that is, well, that's like the ice. It's like when consciousness itself coalesces into form, it's like the solid version of consciousness. Now, why does he say it's still consciousness? The same reason I do, which is, what is this really? Scientists have not, if you ask a physicist what matter is, they'll go, we don't really know. We just keep drilling in deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And we never find matter. Now, my wife is texting me to pick up my daughter, which is important. Let me just text her. By noon. Okay, doing a show will get her. Daddy problems. Hold on. I got to do this right. I texted the wrong person. Hold on. We'll get her doing a show now. Okay. Hasn't texted me. All right, back to whatever it is we were doing, which is less important than family stuff. So why do we say this is made of consciousness and it's the solid form of consciousness as a metaphor? Well, because what is it really? Scientists don't know what matter is. You can keep drilling and you find probability clouds and God knows what. You can't describe it. You can't grasp matter really, even intellectually, because the more you look, the more you find. When you get down to strings, we still don't even know what that is. Vibrating energy, we don't know what that is, right? So what is it experientially? It is simply the knowing of this. So the image of this cup that you're seeing is no different than your awareness of it. In other words, this is in many ways made up of the knowing of it. They're not two things. And so in a way, this is crystallized solid form consciousness. And what is liquid or gas form consciousness? Thought. So thought is kind of like a pool of awareness, and it coalesces into little eddies and currents that look to us like thought. Images, beliefs, bits of verbal stuff, bits of auditory stuff, all out of a pool of this liquid consciousness. So then what would, okay, great. They're supposed to text me. Okay, I'm live now, by the way. Just so she doesn't want to have a full conversation, because that would be awkward. Although not really. You guys would see how I live. How Z-Dog lives on a Sunday. All right, so kid had a sleepover last night, 11-year-old. She's having a blast. She does my video editing, by the way, for our VPZD shows. What do you guys think? Pretty amazing, huh? I figure she's either going to be a content consumer or a content creator, and I'd rather her be a creator. So this kind of liquid consciousness of thought is a good metaphor. So then what is the plasma state of consciousness, where it's undifferentiated, where it's just a sea of energy and potential? That's what my friend Angelo calls unbound consciousness. That is awakeness, awareness without any objects in it, unbound from thought, unbound from subjects. And in meditation, in awakening, you can actually realize unbound consciousness as you are that. In other words, it feels like that's actually what's all that's happening is. And another way to think about it is the space between thoughts. Before there's another thought, if you pay attention in meditation or otherwise to this gap between thoughts, and then another thought arises, oh, that's the gap between thoughts. Okay, great, that's a thought. So it's like that plasma has differentiated into the liquid phase of thought, and then it dissipates again into plasma. Feel what it's like in that plasma state between thoughts. And here's the great paradox. You don't have to think about it to recognize that you're in that state of awake presence. That's the other word for it, is presence. So we use that term a lot, presence. What is that? It's the state of, one way of looking at it, there's several ways, because presence, actually, the experience of presence can evolve as realization occurs, but the experience of pure being, of isness, a pure sense of I am before thought. I am before you finish that sentence. What is that? And I love McGilchrist's metaphor of, like, you know, in order to go from an undifferentiated potential plasma state to something that feels continuous and solid, even though it's not, you change the phase of consciousness to matter. And matter is a shorthand for form in general. So, you know, seeing, smelling, hearing, tasting, touching, sensations, that's all that kind of sense of it. And you could say, well, maybe some of that's more liquid phase, like sensations are more liquid. And then maybe thought is more like a gas phase. It's more amorphous, and it maybe forms into clouds that are more solid thoughts, but then dissipate just as quickly. And here's the punchline. What are you? You are the sky in which all these phases of consciousness are coalescing and forming and disforming and impermanent entirely, but ultimately made of that raw skyness, which is that pure consciousness. And there's even a step beyond that, which we won't talk about, which is, where does consciousness emerge from? The Buddhists call it emptiness. Christians may call it Christ consciousness. The mystical Jewish traditions have different names for it, but we won't go there. Kay Jones, facilitates communication between two hemispheres, or whether it's illusory phenomenon or mechanism. I don't know what that means. I probably missed an earlier comment. Oh, touching on your episode of split consciousness, the left-right hemispheres, can you please give us your thoughts on hemisync meditations, or maybe expound on whether the corpus callosum actually facilitates communication between the two hemispheres? Okay. I don't know what hemisync meditations are, but I'll say this. When I talk about the two hemispheres of the brain, there's the right hemisphere, which McGilchrist describes as kind of the original master of the thing, which is it doesn't really talk, but it understands language. It's very emotionally intelligent. It sees interdependencies, connections. It's kind of connected directly to our immediate experience and our sense gates. And it is fundamentally connected to that sense of the divine, of the bigger picture, of the ineffable, things that can't be described, that are implicit, are contextual, are only known in their context. In other words, that this is a part, but also the whole of everything is reflected in this. The right hemisphere actually groks that. The left hemisphere then kind of evolved as the kind of way that the right can then drill down. It's the emissary of the right. It's like, okay, go out there and let's break things down into parts so that we can build stuff and solidify stuff and have technology and knowledge and continuity and a sense of self and all these other things. But then let's take that back to the right and put it back in its place, in its context, and in its connection and interdependency with everything else. And ancient civilizations were able to do that well. The corpus callosum are the fibers that bridge the two hemispheres. Now, when I say fibers, this is the neuroanatomical thing. I'm speaking more in the metaphor. And again, I think brain is just an icon, the way that these systems look to consciousness, to our particular interface. So corpus callosum doesn't do anything. Neurons don't do anything. Neurons are what mind looks like to itself to an animal that evolved not to have to, that doesn't affect their reproduction. So they see it as almost looks like this cell with these dendrites, and we can measure things and it's internally consistent. It obeys certain rules, but is it causal of anything? And the answer is, I don't think so. Don Hoffman agrees. Alan Tasler quotes Rush, "The universe divided as a heart and mind collided with a future left unguided. For so many troubled years, in a cloud of doubts and fears, our world was torn asunder into hollow hemispheres." That's Rush, Hemispheres, 1979. It was like a 15-minute concept song about the left and the right hemispheres, and they envision them through Apollo and Dionysus. So Apollo being the left hemisphere about order and about, structure and how are we going to survive the winter, and Dionysus being like, fuck all that. Let's go have a party. Now, again, these aren't, it's all about culture and music and joy and spirituality. It's not quite as simple as that, although what a wonderful concept for a rock album, right? That's why Rush is the greatest band of all time, period. All right? Pour a little out for Neil Peart. I digress. So this idea of these hemispheric differences, the corpus callosum, listen, these aren't two things, really. In a sense, it's almost like the yin and the yang. You have that black bit with a little white in it, then you have the white bit with a little black in it. So each has a part of the other, but then both are enclosed in a whole that is bigger than the sum of its parts. And that's what humans are. We're parts, we're also wholes, and in every part you see the whole. It's like a fractal. In every part is recapitulated the entirety of the whole universe. There's a phenomenon or an old paradigm called Indra's net. Indra was this goddess, and the net was this web of stuff, and each place that the web sort of crossed over was a little dewdrop. And in each dewdrop, you could see reflected the entire web of dewdrops. So each was a whole and a part of the whole, and each did not exist outside of the context of the whole. It could not. That's what right hemisphere kind of knows. Our shift towards left hemisphere thinking in society and individuals on social media is this reductionist sense that we can understand this thing that's ineffable and that we are just parts and that the sum of the parts is a literal sum of the parts. It's a mechanical sum of the parts. And it's this mistaken idea that humans are machines. We are not fucking machines. We are not machines. We will never be machines. Machines will never be us. If you look at recent article on self-driving cars, they were talking about how billions have been spent on self-driving cars because, hey, it makes sense. You get a computer to learn how to drive. It will do it better than humans because it doesn't have the human flaws of getting drunk, of texting while driving, of being a dipshit. You can make it consistent. They'll obey rules, and you get all of them on the road, and you have this perfect AI utopia where the thing is so safe, and we cut down on all the car accidents and all of this and the other thing and that. How is it working out? Turns out these things run into people. They are absolutely unintelligent. They only can do what by rote brute force you've taught them. So if they see all these scenarios, they can respond to those specific scenarios. If it deviates, for example, pigeons, sitting on the median of the road. An AI that's never seen that scenario will slam on the brakes thinking that there are objects there and will slow down. And it doesn't matter if there's a bunch of cars behind it, it will put them all at risk. A human driver goes, pigeons, these little assholes are going to fly off the minute I drive up. There's no way you can hit a pigeon on the road because they know they're down to clown. They're going to play around until the car gets close and they're going to fly away. I know this from experience, and they're going to fly away in certain directions. So I'm going to be a little more alert, but I'm not going to panic. I'm not going to slam on the brakes. Computer can't do that unless you show it that scenario. Then what if it's a raccoon and it's a different animal? Well, it's a different scenario, right? Now, what humans are able to do is humans are these integrated, intuitive, conscious, comprehending creatures that are part of Indra's net. They actually can, and we don't even know we're doing this. It's ineffable. It's indescribable. In fact, that's why you can't teach it to a computer, because it's not even teachable to ourselves. When we teach our kids to drive, in a way, we're giving them pointers and wisdom. But, and I know this because I'm going to have to teach my 14-year-old, she's going to become 15 in December, and she's going to get her permit at 15 and a half in California, and then we're going to start driving. And it's not like I can teach her all this stuff. Oh, those pigeons are going to do this. So in those scenarios, you do this. And no. It's going to be like, okay, let's drive. And you're going to watch as her intuition grows and builds on itself in a way that you could never put into a formula or words, because that's the left hemisphere trying to reduce this into this. And it will try. And on some things it'll succeed that are mechanically intelligence based, you can succeed. For example, AI works really well for heavy mining equipment that goes down predictable paths where humans aren't in the way, where it's just going back and forth, and it does it better than humans because it can actually back the truck up the hill and come back down instead of having to do a 3-point turn, because the thing is really good at detecting borders and steering that thing even in reverse. That's great. That's a great use of mechanical intelligence. Now, what happens if there's children playing there, or if the weather conditions change so much that the AI doesn't have those things memorized? Well, that's where human intuition wins every single time. The model of humans as machines is a left brain delusion. We are not machines. There are some aspects of us that could be modeled in machine type language, but they fail very rapidly. And so in medicine, we seem to take this posit that humans are machines. So you adjust a dial on the machine by giving a medicine, and suddenly the machine is fixed. How do vaccines work? Vaccines work by taking advantage of the intense complexity of the human organism. They don't treat us as machines. They go, oh, okay, how would the human normally respond to an organism that is an infectious agent? It would see it. It would mount an immune response. The immune system would learn by multiple elements working interdependently. And the next time you're exposed, it's ready because it can mount this very complex and almost organismal response. It is that. That's what it is. It's not a machine. So you give a vaccine, you're giving a trace amount of that stimulus, and you're letting the machine do its job. That's why I love vaccines. Now, why do I not love medication as much, even though it can be very useful for specific uses, right? Why do we rely so much on a pill to save us from heart disease or a pill to save us from depression? Well, because we're using the medicine as machine model. And what do pills do? They are trying to hack the machine. It thinks it's a machine. Let's hack it. Let's do this. Let's do that. Let's do this. Instead of working in concert with the complexity that's a machine. Now, some of the better medication strategies, like, look, a simple medication strategy like epinephrine for an acute anaphylactic shock. Okay, what is anaphylaxis? Incredibly complex thing, but there's a simple piece of it, which is the fact that epinephrine, adrenaline, actually can counteract mechanistically multiple elements of the response that are harmful. The low blood pressure, the vasodilation, all of that stuff that happens with anaphylaxis. Well, so that's a great one drug, one solution to a very complex response. So there's a good exception, right, where The thing is still not a machine, but you can treat it as machine-like for this one thing, right? And even then, there are downstream effects, high blood pressure immediately from the epinephrine, the sense of panic and all that epinephrine can give you. Of course, you have already got that if you have anaphylaxis. So that's where that kind of reductionism of left brain actually is so helpful. That's why there's no either or here. That's left brain thinking. It's yes and also either or. So sometimes there are opposites that you have to look at. And then all of it is wrapped in this, hey, by the way, it's all not two. Even the not two-ness is not two. Even the non-duality is non-dual. It gets spooky. Let's see, where are we at here? Oh, did I set the bit rate wrong? I sure did. YouTube is warning me. Let me fix that. I tell you, there's just so many variables, even in just going live, and I always get at least one of them wrong. Let me fix this bit rate right now. 51,000. Okay. That should improve the stream quality to more like 4K streaming. Okay. Kevin Lemister says, I had 2 shots and suffered major side effects from both. However, I didn't want to believe it was the vaccine the first time. However, when I got the second, I was down for almost a whole year. So Kevin, I mean, again, your experience is your experience. So whatever you experienced is absolutely your experience. Because humans are complex, we don't know how much of that is the specific element of the vaccine, how much of that is a psychological reaction to having had the vaccine, how much of that is a social reaction. So biopsychosocial. All of it makes up our responses to any medication, any intervention, any disease. Long COVID, what is long COVID? Nobody knows because it's biopsychosocial. Maybe there's a biological trigger, there's a psychological component, and there's a social component. But we like to treat it as all one thing. Like, for example, oh, it was all the vaccine, or it was all COVID, or it was all, whatever. And then you see the news feeds into it. Oh, COVID causes brain shrinkage. It's like, oh, come on, dude. Like, this is a complex system. And so that means, Kevin, maybe in your complex system, something in that vaccine triggered something that triggered a cascade of effects that you are experiencing as symptoms. So it's even sometimes beyond our ability to comprehend because it's so complex. But it would be, again, you're looking at a big system. With vaccines, this is why, like, okay, why we are not focusing on the sickest and most vulnerable people when we focus on vaccine education. Like a 70-year-old is at vastly higher risk from COVID infection than they are from any side effects of the vaccine on average, and especially at a population level. So it just makes sense. The area under the curve of life saved in that population is going to be vastly higher than the people that will have side effects. Because remember, there always are going to be people who have bad effects from any intervention. And it sounds like you were one of them. So here's the question. Why then would you mandate it for people that are young and healthy when at that point their benefit is smaller? It's not zero, but it's smaller. And then any risk of any side effect, even if they're sick for 2 days with just the standard symptoms of the vaccine and it messes up their ability to work. Because the question is, did that vaccine then lower their risk of getting COVID enough that it prevents them from losing work days for that? And it's not clear, right? Early on, we thought it did. Now it's like not entirely clear because you're not really preventing infection, you're preventing severe disease. But young people generally don't have that higher risk of severe disease. It's not zero though. They could still have it. And often it's healthy people. Sometimes it'll just happen, especially with kids. So, there's an argument, well, vaccinate all the kids then just to prevent those few cases. But then you need to characterize clearly, well, then what about myocarditis and what about the other effects? And so those are the conversations you want to have, right? My kids are both vaccinated, and my oldest kid decided she wanted to get a booster mainly out of the social pressure in the Bay Area, and my youngest didn't. And I would not think that either one of them would need boosters. Neither have had COVID that we know of, right? So we make that decision based on our kids. Now, I myself am vaccinated and boosted a single time, but I'm not getting the bivalent booster until I see more evidence that it's going to prevent severe disease in me, a 49-year-old male, and I have yet to see that. So that's how I look at it for myself. Everybody has to look at their own risk stratification. I do get concerned when I see 70-year-olds not vaccinated who've not had COVID, or even if they have had COVID, it's probably not a terrible idea to get the vaccine, just because, again, we know the predilection of this disease. It's for older, frail, multi-comorbidity people, and then unlucky others. So let's focus on the people that we can definitely help with that. Hitchhiker, survival of the fittest. Lisa Goodman, I have only had the J&J vaccine. After being home for a week now, sick with stupid COVID again, I really wished I'd gotten one mRNA booster in August like I planned and didn't do. Well, so Lisa, I mean, I'm sorry you're sick, but you're relatively young, because I know you're relatively young and healthy, and it sucks though, right? So the question is, when you get that mRNA booster, you probably are protected against immediate infection for a period of weeks. And so you can kind of time that out if that's something important to you, like you're getting married or or you're going on a trip. Maybe that's a time to think about getting your booster, right? But if you're concerned about severe disease, it's very unlikely that, having had COVID already, having had 2 shots, you're probably okay for severe disease. Anthony, what's up, Z? I only have 2 shots and never seem to catch COVID. Fingers crossed. Well, hey, you and me. I mean, I got the 3, but haven't seemed to get COVID yet. But I mean, who knows, right? I haven't tested for the nucleocapsid antibody that you would test to see if you've had it before. So it's hard to know. Amy is talking to Ashley. Lotus Lily, Zubin, how did they develop a vaccine in 6 months? Well, because it's actually been a decade in the works, right? So I've done videos on that. The actual science of it wasn't rushed. It was they streamlined the approval that would normally take another decade by actually taking the risk away from pharmaceutical companies to do the trials, because those trials can be expensive. Anyways, I've done early videos in the pandemic about that. So that's not something I'm as worried about. What I am worried about is them rushing the bivalent booster, which Paul Offit also worries about. Rushing meaning we don't have human data to say that the BA.4/5 bivalent vaccine helps prevent severe disease in humans. In fact, there's data saying the original booster might actually be better because you're not splitting, and Paul talked about this in a Wall Street Journal op-ed that he did, you're not splitting the dose, 25 micrograms, Pfizer-wise, 25 micrograms of the original Wuhan strain and 25 micrograms of BA.4/5. The old booster was just the full 50 of Wuhan, which generates a singular response. So I don't know. I think I'm with Paul on this until more data comes out and it proves us wrong. Let's see. Looking at comments. And yet we cannot discount the placebo effect of medications, Savita. So what is the placebo effect? Biopsychosocial. There's some biological component when you have an expectation or a therapeutic alliance with a caregiver. So you can actually have a biological secretion of beneficial neurohormonal responses. So there's a biological component. Then there's a psychological component of some expectation, tone, or other sense of being cared for or having your suffering witnessed that generates a beneficial response that affects the body-mind system. And then there's the social component, which is, I'm connected into this bigger web of humans and they're supporting me and they actually expect that I do this. And there's an expectation in this kind of therapy that I'll get better. And, it's very complicated, but that's what humans are. We're not machines, right? We're we're consciousness in its different phases of existence. There's the solid phase, there's the liquid gas phase of thought and expectation, and there's the pure plasma that we all are, which is the ground of being itself. This is all metaphor. Don't take any of this literally, because that's very left brain. Oh, you mean we're gas? Josh says, I had 2 shots, got COVID 2 times within a month apart, and I'm 42, overweight, and a smoker. In your opinion, should I get more COVID shots? 42, overweight, already got COVID 2 times in a month. Listen, man, I think you should stop smoking if you can. I know that's easy to say. I know how hard it is to do. I think you should focus on what you're eating, seeing if you can change simple things that'll make you feel good. And by extension, you'll lose weight and you'll be in better metabolic shape so that your risk of severe disease, which is already not that high because you've had vaccination and infection twice, you've been boosted, with natural strains. I would focus on those things and don't even worry or ask the question about vaccine, because again, that's just like a tiny piece of what the issue is. With a lot of us, it's our American way of life where, again, we're sedentary, we're stressed out, we're socially disconnected, we're obese, we're inflamed because of our diet and our processed food and our environment, and all of it in Indra's net, right, is a whole and reflects the whole, and our whole is getting increasingly diseased. So it's manifesting in us. But we can only influence this component of the whole, which is the whole in itself. So when we wake up, when we change, the whole changes. It really does. That's how you change the world. It's the only way to change the world. So I would start with that, honestly. Mr. Toad says, what is the liquid in the Bacta tank comprised of? It's chilled monkey brains. He's referring to Star Wars, where Luke Skywalker, or in the Mandalorian series, Boba Fett series, where Boba Fett is in that juice in the diaper tank, I call it. Sunset Way, if you had to decide right now between choosing between the latest booster or getting a definite BA.5/6 infection, which would you choose? That's a great question. Would I rather get a natural BA.4/5 infection, or would I take the vaccine if I had to choose? If someone was holding a gun to my head, I would know. If I had a choice between the two, no doubt at all, I would get the vaccination. And I will tell you why. It's going to trigger all kinds of people who are vaccine hesitant, which is okay. Here's why. With the vaccine, the known risks of the vaccine are very small. There are unknown risks, right, with BA.4/5, but it's been given to a lot of people, and you start to see these manifesting. They're quite small. And I know that I'll have some immune response to the vaccine, so I know it'll generate some protection. Now, it may not be what we want, but it's there. Now, again, you're forcing me to either take this vaccine or get infected. Not the third choice, which is do nothing, which is my choice right now, based on everything I've told you. Now, if I go and get naturally infected, all right, I am 49 years old. I have a blood clotting disorder, which is never manifest with a blood clot, but it's a genetic risk. I am rolling the dice that this infection is going to be mild, and 99% of the time, it is going to be. But the chances of this infection harming me are vastly greater if I had to choose between the two, right? I'm going to get one or the other than that vaccine, period. All right? And so because of what we know about SARS-CoV-2, and I'm not even talking about long COVID and all that bullshit. I'm talking about what we really understand about this virus, people who work on the front lines who see it. A healthy 49-year-old can die of COVID just by bad luck. So I wouldn't want to do that intentionally. I would get the vaccine if they were putting a gun to my head. So that would be my answer for that. Why do you think it's metaphorical? Don't you think leveling about this question has more value than wishy-washiness? What question are we talking about, Kashta? Remind me, and I'll answer you. Jesse Zhang, are you concerned that COVID won't ever end and that we will have to live with a new normal for the rest of our lives? Jesse, I think you emailed me like 3 times about this or something. So here's what I say, Jesse. If you watch my show, you will know the answer to this. And you may not watch my show regularly. I think people are going to shift back into their normal way of being, and they already are. I think there are vested interests that want to see COVID go on forever, and they're going to be outweighed by the mass of society that is more rational and see it as a risk in context of other risks. We will live with COVID because we have no choice. Just like we've lived with all the other coronaviruses that have appeared over the millennia, and that's just how it is. So I think it'll take longer than we'd like, and it's going to cause continued harm to our mental state. So people who are living in anxiety and fear still won't come out of their houses. That is a collateral damage of the COVIDian mentality, the singular absolutism that this is the only problem, is we must prevent COVID, instead of seeing it as Indra's net. It's like a lot of things. A lot of different things go into it. So we have to be reasonable, right-brained, rational, and use our left brain as a tool, not as the end, because that's a very left brain way of thinking. So Jesse, I think, yes, I'm concerned about it, but I don't think it's going to be a thing, because I think people are generally more, I mean, they've had it. Go travel around the country. You'll see. If you live in an elite city, you may be confused. If you go to the rest of the country, you're like, dude, where's COVID? They're not thinking about it. Okay, Kishkashta says, the Bernardo Kastrup, we are dissociated alters theory. Okay. So, sorry, the metaphor. When I say metaphor, I'm talking about left brain, right brain, consciousness as a fluid. And I'll tell you why I say that's metaphor, because, and I'm a believer in what Kastrup is saying, that everything is mind, and we're all like little alter egos of the one mind. But even that's a metaphor. Why do I say that? Because that is the mind trying to structuralize. Remember, Bernardo is an amazingly brilliant computer science guy and engineer and philosopher. He thinks right brain, right brain. He's brilliant. The thing is, all of this thinking is just that, it's thought. What reality is absolutely beyond the mind. So all we use is metaphor. There's no absolute truth within the mind, period. Every thought you've ever had is not true. It doesn't point to anything real except for another thought. The fundamental nature of reality, and the only way you can know this, is to be it, because you are it. And that's where the process of realization is, the embodied process of realization. You realize it, that this is indescribable, it's ineffable, it's beyond the mind. Everything in the mind is just masturbation, intellectual masturbation, and circle jerking around each other, trying to point at something with words and left brain that is absolutely indescribable and so far beyond the mind that it's absurd. Now, that's all said, that's reality. That's the absolute truth of everything, and it's beyond our ability to talk about. The mind can't even go there. Great. That said, we're having this experience right now in mind. We share the mind structure of thought with each other, and therefore we speak in a way that has to make some sense in the relative world, which to us is very real. Our daughter's suffering is real. Our loved ones are real. And so we speak in that way. Left brain, right brain, consciousness as a fluid, this and that, because we want to communicate with other beings that we think are separate. There are no beings. There is no separate. There's only just this. But there's also the virtual reality that we live in. And so that's why I speak in terms of it being metaphor, because the absolute reality is not speakable. There's a saying, right? The Tao that can be spoken is not the true Tao. So everything else is just, but we have to do it. I got to keep an eye on my phone to make sure my daughter isn't texting me from her sleepover to be picked up. Savita, early on in the pandemic, CDC listed a fourth contraindication for, okay, I'm done with COVID questions. Proof of stake. What do you think about more masking stuff. Hold on. Let me see. But okay, Joseph, because it's masking. What do you think? No, not Joseph, proof of stake. What do you think about continued masking within the hospital, and your thoughts that this may change given most areas of the social sector are unmasked? I think that my friend Vinay Prasad has written brilliantly about this on Sensible Medicine, and you should read his article on hospital-based masking and the science or lack thereof with that. So that's my thought on that. Kishkashta says, thank you. God is no longer falsifiable. Bernardo's work made me realize that I was wrong about being an atheist. Oh my gosh. So I was a hardcore atheist too. And now even that word doesn't make sense. Like what, right? What does that even mean? Bernardo, Donald Hoffman, Sam Harris, who's an atheist, woke me up to the idea that there's something ineffable beyond the mind. And so even the term atheist means, well, oh, I don't believe in a single God or whatever. I don't even know what that even means anymore. The word God is just another word in thought and consciousness. What is your lived experience of this now moment, this eternal now? What's your experience right now? Look in your experience. Do you know what you are? What are you right now when you don't think about it? That's all you do. That's all you need to do. And you'll see that there's no atheism, Christianity, Judaism. It doesn't matter what what words you use. They're just words. they're like, it's the dream state. The absolute reality is you. In fact, the dream state is just another perturbation of the absolute truth of this moment, which is only experienceable now. And if what I say sounds crazy, it's because it's using words. So they're going to sound crazy. They're going to sound paradoxical. They're going to sound stupid. People are going to think I'm on drugs. They always say that. I'm like, dude, if only I had access to drugs. I'm the walrus, says the shape. Yep. K. Jones just says am. That's good. That's all you need to say. All right. Jody loves Vinay. Okay. I think I got to go because I'm pretty sure it's almost noon Pacific and I'm going to get yelled at if I'm late to pick up my daughter. Let me see what else is going on here, though. I get real addicted to reading your comments. Okay, last one, because this is just fun. I would like to ask you about your one meal a day. Do you ever experience dumping syndrome? I try to eat 1 time a day because I love intermittent fasting for my blood sugar issues. So I eat 1 meal a day because I found over years that it's a pattern of eating that works very well for me. I don't get hungry during the day. I eat my 1 meal over a period of a couple hours. That's when I eat. It's like more like a time restricted. Not so much intermittent fasting. I like to think of it as time-restricted eating. So I eat during these particular hours of the day with my family, so it becomes a social thing. We typically now more often eat at home, which reduces overall calorie load, and it works well. Dumping syndrome it's complex, but one way to look at it is a syndrome where people who have had gastric bypass and things like that, when they eat, it kind of triggers this kind of neurohormonal response and they just basically shit themselves. That's a really bad way to explain dumping syndrome. I don't experience that. It really doesn't affect, bowel habits for me. I'm giving away a lot of information. It's the same clockwork that it always is for me. Everybody's different. Everybody's system is complex and different. So you have to find the way of eating that works for you. And it may be just the standard American diet you tolerate fine. It may be that, you have to restrict certain types of nutrients like carbs or fats or whatever. Maybe you want a plant-based diet. Maybe you want a keto. Maybe you want a carnivore diet. It doesn't matter as long as it works for you in your particular biochemistry and your biopsychosocial makeup. Does it work in your social fabric? Does it work psychologically for you? Are you always thinking about food? Are you obsessed about food? What I found is when I come back from meditation retreats, I've lost a ton of weight. Why? Not because they aren't serving 3 meals a day. I'm still eating 1. But because my obsession with food mentally in the thought world is gone. It comes back slowly as I get trapped back in thought. But boy, that obsession because remember, earlier when I started this thing, I said I am a Enneagram type 6 with a 7 wing. And it turns out the 7s are always looking to the next experience. And so for me in my mind, I often get these intrusive thoughts of what's the next meal? I'm really looking forward to it. Are we going to have this? Are we going to have that? Are we going to have this? And it's all thought, thought, thought. It's escaping the present moment, which we are afraid to experience because we're conditioned to try to find happiness in the future or in memory instead of right here because it's only this. And so the mind then, the busy mind does what it does and it secretes thoughts, and those thoughts are off the next meal for me. And so when that next meal comes, I might overeat because I've been anticipating it all day. And instead, after retreat, I'm like, oh, food. Man, I never, ever have eaten before until this bite. That's what it's like. It's definitely a mental game, Bets H. When will Angelo DeLulo be back? Says, wake up. I like your name. We're going to do a show where he's going to interview me for his channel. So stay tuned. And I'll share it all over my platforms too. So stay tuned. We're doing a retreat in November, November 1st through 5th or something. Totally silent retreat with like 80 or 90 of the supporters from the Z Tribe and beyond. It's going to be great. All right. Love you guys. Got to go. You guys know what to do, right? Like, just subscribe to the show, all that. You already are. If you're leaving a comment, you can only comment if you're subscribed to the show in the chat, live chat. Share the video, become a supporter. It helps us out a lot. zdogmd.com/supporters, or you can give us donations one time. paypal.me/zdogmd. That's the housekeeping I do. You don't see sponsored messages and all that. If you are a supporter of the show, I might upload this onto Locals or Facebook, etc., without ads, so you can watch it without ads. Juliana Kokala, love the spectacles. Great look. The retreat is coming up, so looking forward to it. Juliana was at the last one. It was awesome. Yeah, my reading glasses. I need them now because I'm just embracing being an old man. Everything's impermanent, including the plasticity of your lens. So presbyopia for life, son. All right. We out. Now I got to figure out how to stop this thing. End stream, son.